The session itself is in three different sections. First part is I will start with a PowerPoint presentation. It's not that long. We'll go up to part of the PowerPoint. We'll finish the assessment process. We'll then go into looking at the application form itself, and Damien will take most of that because he has been used to using that last year. And then I'll finish with more general information and advice. So just a bit of introduction about the programme itself. Northern Ireland Community Relations Council, for people who don't know us, we're an arm's length body of the Executive Office, and we administer the core funding programme on their behalf. It complements funding that's provided by TEO to a range of other funds and other programmes, and contributes to the delivery of Together, Building a United Community, the TBUC priorities, and most people in the room will have heard of TBUC. What the programme and the fund will contribute to, it will contribute to salary and running costs for organisations with strategic importance in the delivery of community relations work in Northern Ireland. So we will not be funding project costs, but it will be salary and running costs, and we'll take you through that as you go along, particularly within the application. The focus of the scheme is to address sectarianism, and that's really important for you to know and to understand, and to remind yourselves of when you're doing the application. So it needs to be very, very clear about how you're going to address sectarianism within the application. And the clarity in this is really important. We have an annual budget of about 1.2 million. But there are a number of our groups that are on their second year funding. There are some groups on the second of third year funding, and some groups on the third year of a third year funding. And we have commitments already to them. So out of that 1.2 million, there's approximately 500,000 to allocate in the round. This is a programme that is consistently oversubscribed. So the need to be very clear around how the programme is going to, how your work is going to address sectarianism is very, very important. Because that's what will, and we'll come to the markings later on, that's the sort of stuff that we will be looking for in the assessment. So if you can take anything away from the very first slide, it is about we're doing an application. We need to focus on how our work and the work of the people being funded through the programme are going to address sectarianism. So just checking stage prior to the assessment, there are a number of things that we have to check. Is the organisation legally able to operate in Northern Ireland? Is the organisation financially viable? And we will be bringing in an independent accountancy firm to look at the accounts for the groups to give us some assurance that there is a financial viability. Has the group got clear demonstration that they have robust financial and reporting systems in place? Do you have an adequate community relations, good relations, and equality policy in operation? And that's one of the core documents that you'll be asked to upload as part of the application. Has the application form been completed fully? Provided all the correct documentation as required in the additional information and declaration section of the application. And again, we'll go through that when we go through the application form so that people understand what documents we definitely require. Does the work described in the applicant's work plan meet the specific remit of the funding programme? And again, back to some of the stuff around sectarianism, and then how it meets other areas of work, including TBUC. And are all the proposed beneficiaries, do they reside in Northern Ireland? So we do that as a check-in stage prior to assessment. If the group meet all of those assessment criteria, initial checks, they're moved on to the full assessment process. So the strategic priorities for the 24-25 core funding, we have two welcome statements, which relate to the geographic reach and also the thematic impact for the type of work supported during 24-25. So the geographic impact, and we would welcome applications which deliver good relations, but it has to be community relations programs in the following areas. Pardon me, Ards and North Down, Armagh City, Banbridge and Craven, Belfast South, Causeway Coast and Glens, Lisburn and Castlereagh and Mid Ulster. And the Community Relations Council would also welcome applications which will deliver good relations programs in rural and or border communities. That's not to say if the council area that you reside in or where your work is going to be delivered is not listed, that doesn't mean you can't apply. It just means these are areas where we would like to, we're going to have some specific focus, and really will only come into play if there are applications of a similar standard as we go towards the end of the funding. And we look to see, well, are any of those applications either the geographic impact of the council areas or working and doing work along the in rural areas or in border communities. The thematic impact that we would welcome applications for are to support and develop the next generation of good relations practitioners, as this relates to the emerging challenges such as sustainability, the environment, poverty, the changing nature of communities within Northern Ireland, and good relations from a global perspective, and then work with aims to engage communities on emerging issues of concern that are identified by the applicant groups as requiring priority intervention. The need for such work, you need to clearly evidence that by yourselves. And that means, this is around bringing in the lived experience to the application. And we're very aware that there are lots of statistics out there that are demonstrating sectarianism in various areas, but there are lots of areas where statistics don't actually identify anything. But there could be lots of things going on that are reported in local papers, in local studies that you may have done, and the local engagement with those with a lived experience. So remember that it's just not all about stats. It's about bringing that lived experience and that local knowledge into the application form, and evidence and that experience and local knowledge. So to be very transparent, the assessment process, there are 3 elements that will be considered. Assessment of the application and the materials presented, the financial analysis and scrutiny, any significant findings from review, and in many ways that will relate in the most part to groups that are currently in receipt of core funding. So the groups that will be making applications for continuation funding, and they have to send in reviews and progress reports, and we will take a look at them. And then the assessment is scored using the following guidelines. So the methodology and the outcomes, which is the impact it's going to, you hope the work is going to have, is 60%. Value for money is 20%, and that's just not down to actual the numbers game, because you realise that in some areas there will be high numbers of potential beneficiaries, but there may be other areas where the number is low, but the impact actually might be high. The organisational experience and the track record will be 10%, and then the governance and financial arrangements will be 10%. So whilst the bottom 3 add up to 40, you can see where the core assessment is focused on, and that is the methodology, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, where, when, and how, and then the outcomes, the impact, the difference it's going to make. So that's where you need to be focusing a lot of your work in terms of your responses to the questions. So that's how we will score. So that's hopefully as transparent as we can make it at the present minute. So the methodology and outcomes, so the alignment of outcomes with strategic priorities and the outcome statements, the fit with the programme remit, and we have a detailed methodology provided for carrying out the work plan. So we do want to know the how and the why and the where and the when and with who. And then the value for money, it must be proportionate, the cost must be proportionate to the outcomes that will be achieved. And this is very important, that the planned activity is strategic rather than one-off reactive work. Now, we realise that there could be times throughout any funding period that reactive work might have to happen, and that's very, very important. But for the purposes of planning ahead, we like to see it being strategic, and you can deal with the one-off reactive work as and when it arises. On the organisation experience and track record, evidence and skills experience and outcomes-based work and development work in a complex environment. So very much outcomes-based rather than outputs. Demonstrate an understanding of the policy and contextual issues within the community relations sector. So a wider understanding of the things that actually impact or can impact on community relations work in the area that you're going to work in. And there are plenty of those at the present minute. And then compliance, key issues to account from previous community relations fund awards and other funders. And that's where we might talk to other funders as well, to just get a feel for organisations, particularly the ones that are probably new to us, in terms of how did they do with the funding, how did they do with the work. And then the governance and financial arrangements, demonstrating an adequate match funding. And the reason for that is that for the salary part of the award, we can only fund up to a maximum of 90%. And therefore, we need to see an additional 10% in place, or the potential to have that in place, to make up the difference. And they do have a good relations policy in place as well, which demonstrates that actually good relations is part and parcel of the work, and it's not being cobbled together for the purposes of making this application.
Okay, folks, look, I'm going to take you really through the part of the application form. So there's going to be parts where Michael's going to be speaking and I'm going to be speaking, okay? And then I'll have Alana there in the background. And Alana will chip in at any stage to say you're wrong or don't forget to say this. Alana keeps us right. So Alana's the person we all depend on, okay, folks? So it's just to say to you, first of all, I'm going into this application form in a slightly different place. Whenever basically you register, you'll have to go in and it's basically doing the monitoring form end of it before you go anywhere near the application form. So whenever you initially would go in, some of you have maybe already went in and had a bit of a play with this anyway, but whenever you first go in, it's a monitoring form section you have to complete, but that'll be done automatically for you before you can go into the application form, okay? So I'm just going to take you through everything really here and just really show you how this operates, okay? And the first thing is really, you'll come in here and you'll see about these welcome statements first of all. So I'm just going to say something briefly about this before we go into the application form proper. There's a couple of, so again, as you would expect, we would basically say to everybody, just before you do an application, make sure you read the application guidelines, just to make sure that it's an appropriate application form for yourselves, because we obviously don't want to be wasting anybody's time. So just to obviously familiarize yourself with the guidelines there, okay? So there's the main guidelines of the application form. We also ask you to refer to some of the kind of policy documents, because you are asked in the application form how you feel that your body of work makes a contribution towards the kind of higher level government policies. So within that, you'll see that there's two different things referred to here, okay? So it's basically, first of all, you have our guidelines, and then you have a link to the TBUC strategy. So that's again a bit more background. Most of you will be familiar with that anyway, but it's just that's the main kind of government kind of good relations strategy that we're all working under. Okay, and you also have sorry folks, I'm just making sure I can see everything here. And then you have the TBUC kind of community strategy priorities and outcomes here as well. So folks, as we are all aware, we're currently sitting with no functioning government in place at the minute, okay? So we are currently working within a kind of TBUC, these kind of strategy priorities and outcomes. What we'd usually have is like what you would call a programme for government, but because we don't have a government, we're still operating within all of those. So whenever you maybe look through some of this information, you'll kind of think, well, that's going back to 2019, that's a bit out of date. That's currently the strategy documents that we're working under until something comes in its place. Okay, but if any questions about that, just let us know. as Michael's been talking there, the core funding program, its priority focus is still on sectarianism. Now, what we'd probably call in olden terminology would the kind of the green and orange, the kind of issue of sectarianism here in Northern Ireland. And whenever you see me talking through the application form, you'll see these labels that we still don't like the labels, but unfortunately we still get asked questions around it. And you'll see PUL mentioned and CNR, and that's Protestant Unionist Loyalist, and then Catholic Nationalist Republican. These are labels that are probably outdated at this stage, and we're obviously going to be working on changing those. But that's the current terminology we're working under. Okay, and then just briefly on the welcome statements that Michael has mentioned there. These have really been just coming through from us looking at the balance of work that's currently being supported in the core funding programme and the actual number of incidents and crimes happening in terms of hate crime, particularly with a sectarian motivation happening in these areas. All right, so that's where these areas have come from. And what we're always keen to emphasise is to say there may well be areas that you're working in that aren't sitting there, that there may be issues happening, for example, in rural and or border communities that aren't highlighted there, okay? But there's also issues in your community or areas that you're working in that are maybe not listed here, but certainly that's where we'd be looking at this in terms of your thematic impact around work that aims to engage communities and emerging issues of concern identified by yourselves as the applicant groups. So we're also recognising that you as groups working in the communities know the community issues better than we would. These things might not necessarily show themselves up in the kind of higher level statistics, but that's where you make your that's really where you make your rationale within your application about why this work needs to happen. Because one of the first questions we always get asked is, "Oh, where I'm working isn't currently listed up there. Am I going to be penalised for that?" And it's no, you're not going to be penalised at all. It's really just we're just obviously trying to highlight issues that we're seeing kind of coming up in terms of the areas where the work is happening, and potentially that can be gaps in provision or gaps in activity, or when there's been kind of, if you want to call it hotspots or whatever, but there's been issues happening in those areas. Okay, so don't be thinking, "Oh, I'm not working in that area, I'm going to be marked down." It's not about that. The main thing is it's making a good application. Okay, so maybe more your focus is not going to be so much in these areas, but that's where your focus comes in this kind of thematic impact. So it's about making a good, strong argument and case for the work happening and respond to the issues that you're talking about. Okay, so but we'll talk a wee bit more about that as we go through the application. It's also to say, look, if you have any immediate kind of queries about the application process, you can go to Michael in your first instance, but if Michael isn't there, you can obviously contact me as well. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through the application form here. So for this first part, I'm going to go into your organization. Okay, so everything is set out here in a summary for you. Okay, and I'll talk a bit more about this as we go through as well. But this application form will not allow you to submit until every section here is complete. So I've obviously been doing a wee bit of work in the background, and I'll show you how that operates. But when we're going through the application form, I will be emphasising to you I'll be making the same point about downloading a PDF of your form before you submit anything, because you want to make sure that you're happy and content with everything you've put into it before you hit the submit button. All right. So it just takes you through the main sections here. So we're going to go into your organization first. And then I'll take you through the work areas. Okay. So Michael, are you okay to speak briefly to this part? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure I've got control here, Michael.
Okay. So this is, most groups, if not all groups, will understand this is the bog standard information required for the group. So contact name, a telephone number that we can contact, and an email. Really important that that the contact name and email are kept up to date, so that potentially the person might leave in the interim and we have no way of contacting. So make sure that if somebody does leave or there's a new contact, or even the contact has a different email address, that they forward that information to CRC to make sure that we have that. Really, really important. The lead organisation is the next one, and you'll see where on a lot of these questions you have a red asterisk on the left hand side. Those are compulsory questions to answer. If you don't answer them, Amy will take you through. So lead organisation, again, and the telephone number. The organisation type, you have a charity, a company's house, both registered charity and a company and other. If you're a charity number, we need your, if you're a registered charity, we need your charity number, and what is your company number, if you're a limited company, whatever that happens to be. Remember that, and then if you're a company, you can be a charity and a company, but your the most important legal identity then becomes your company. You could be then another, like a CIC, but if you put other, we need to know what that is. So describe your organisation's main purpose and regular community relations activities. You'll just see, and that's a standard thing you'll have in most forms. Data for mission, activities, and highlight the community good relations, strategic aims, and objectives in your latest plan. You will see that there are only 400 words, so these are word limited. And as Stephen said earlier on, you can type away. It's important to download it as a PDF when you finish, to make sure that what you've typed is on, rather than you can type away, forget about the 400 words, and some of the most important stuff is not included. So really, really important to remember that. Then a short generic description about your organisation and the work this proposal would support. And that's just also for us in terms, like, and you see we're down to 150 words. That's for us to, if you are successful in getting funding, it's usually for publicity and media statements if successful. So again, keep this concise. 150 words is not a big pile for a generic short description. So when you get down and finish that, and that is just the bog standard information that you usually get in any sort of form, you hit save progress.
Because just to say, whenever you everything you do here, it's just to get yourself used to hitting that save progress button. So it has saved the information, but the system obviously highlights that basically anything with a red asterisk, if you haven't, and I've done this obviously on purpose, if you haven't added any information in, it's just basically telling you that you need to complete those sections. Okay. Now it will allow you to go back into, you'll basically be going back to, we're going to hit return to summary here. Okay. And that'll take us into that summary page. But every time you go down to it, okay, so it'll say the stuff for your organisation is progress, so it hasn't been finished. So again, unless you've got everything finished, it won't allow you to submit any application form, okay? But again, as I'm going through this, I'll highlight it again for you, okay? Now, we're getting into the main body of the application now, so it's into your work plan. And as Michael alluded to earlier, this is basically worth 60% of the total score, okay? So it's particularly important, this section, but I'll show you what we need to do with this, okay? So as again, before you fill in anything in the work plan, just familiarise yourself with the core funding themes and the core funding outcomes, okay? And I'll talk a bit about that as we go through the page. Again, it's just to build up that picture in your head to make sure that this is an appropriate funding programme for the body of work that you're planning to do. And again, it just helps you kind of explain the work that you're doing. Okay, now I'm going to take you down this. So anything in the form at the minute, I don't think we'll see it in your version. Will you get anything in the blue section is for us, okay? So don't be worrying about anything up there. That's just an admin thing for us, okay? So we're going to work it down here, and I'm going to explain why we asked some of these questions and some of the things we're aware of around this. So don't be worrying yourselves about this, okay? So it's just really asking for a project title. Again, that's just helpful for us to kind of just get to know what you're actually calling your work. That's always very important for us whenever we're reporting to others about the sort of work that we're supporting. So if it's something good and concise and explains what you're wanting to do, okay? And then choosing any other funders who may be supporting this work. Again, we're keenly aware that everybody is operating in a difficult funding environment, okay? So the core funding programme was cut last year, and a lot of project-based funds in terms of supporting good relations, community relations have been cut and very severely through what's happening. So we know that sometimes whenever you're proposing bodies of work, you don't actually know who else is going to be supporting it, or you might have an application form in there and you don't know the outcome as yet. Okay, but if you have any sense of, we may be applying or we have something in place, or we've got something in in the process, you can add it in here. Again, this is just really helping us to get a sense of who's supporting Good Relations work, and then who do we need to engage and talk to about how's the work going, how do we support it better. And folks, as I was talking to Michael yesterday about this, and we see for anything under Piece 4, this would be now Piece Plus, okay? So anything you see under Piece 4, you can just take that as being Piece Plus at the minute, okay? So again, and if there's any other funders, just hit the other function and then just add in the other funder, because for example, there may be others not listed there. It could be Big Lottery, or it could be any other different funder, okay? And then this section now, we'll ask a bit more detail as we go down the page on this, okay? But it's just really to give us an overall sense of where the work's going to be taking place, or where you're hoping it's going to be taking place, okay? So again, that's just the district council area where it's likely to take place. And again, look, I think I've mentioned it earlier, but we are also keenly aware that we're asking you to fill an application form in 17th of November is the deadline for this, that this is for a body of work that is going to be happening from April of next year. So again, we know that things will change, and that things are in certain areas, they're a bit uncertain at the minute. But again, this is just giving us your best sense of what you're wanting to do and what you'd like to be doing. Again, we're keenly aware that we're only providing core costs. A lot of groups will have to go elsewhere to apply for project costs. So we know there's a lot of uncertainty in this, but again, this is just all of this information helps to build up a picture of what you're wanting to do. And that's for the person, Michael and others who will be assessing this, okay? So this information is important. Now this is basically asking first of all, so that's why it's familiar, that's why it's you need to familiarise yourself with the TBUC, the main kind of TBUC headings that are in the documents in this application. Again, you have the 4 main headings: children and young people, our shared community, our safe community, and our cultural expression, okay? But whenever you pick this TBUC priority area, it also lists you some of our own CRC themes, okay? So we did a lot of work on this over the years, and it basically means whatever TBUC drop down you select, that will then dictate what options you get for here on the core funding theme. So again, that's why you need to familiarise yourself with the themes that we're using as well. And basically, we use these themes to give a wee bit more detail below the TBUC headings. Okay, so again, it's building up that picture of what you're wanting to do. Again, if you have any kind of questions about any of that, just let us know. You also have the option to pick a secondary core funding theme. You don't need to select that if you don't want to. Again, there's no wee red asterisk there beside it, so it's not a mandatory field. So if you don't need it, don't use it, that's fine. Again, you have 200 words to just basically provide a short description of the work you intend to do. So again, that's just building up a picture of what you're wanting to do in this work area. Okay, once we get to the bottom of this work area, I'll explain what you need to do next, okay, and where we're going with this. So again, that's just a description of what you're wanting to do. Again, that helps build up a picture in the assessor's head of ultimately what you're wanting to do in your work. Now this part is to explain why this work need to take place. So this is your needs analysis, okay? So as we were talking earlier about, we've obviously said about work referring to the CRC welcome statements there, okay? But again, for everybody, no matter if you're working in one of those areas or not, or you basically need to explain here why you feel the work needs to take place, okay? So this is your needs assessment. So this is a particularly important part of the application form. So if you do that there, okay, now we also have the option here, if you want to upload any kind of documents to say, you're basically saying, this is why this needs to take place. Now, this can be different for different organizations. And again, Michael, if you have any examples, you can chip in here as well if you're happy to do so. But you may also have your own kind of either a research report or evaluation report or any other kind of reports that you've done internally within your own organization, basically explaining why your work needs to take place or why it's happening. So you can use things like that. We're trying to kind of stay away from using kind of uploading big generic documents of statistics that that are in the public domain. It's really you making the case about why this work needs to happen within basically the area that you're working in.
So it could be things like maybe a community survey you've just done quite recently. Or it could be things where in your local papers, things have been reported over a specific amount of time, where it actually highlights what's going on in your local area, or the areas that you're looking to cover. So, as Damien said, it's just not all about stats. And if you know the areas that you are planning to work in, and you know the participants and beneficiaries you're planning to work with, there should be, enough information there, or you should have gathered information from them as well around why this is needed, and what are the things that are needed in terms of addressing some of the issues. So just don't rely on stats, rely on that lived experience, and be aware that there are other sources of information in your area that might actually provide more detailed and maybe a more visual information around why this work needs to take place.
And it's probably helpful as well if you're uploading any kind of documents, maybe just to highlight that section of the document that you're talking about. Again, it just helps the assessor to kind of get a sense of, okay, what are we talking about here specifically? Okay. Now, again, this is where that getting familiar with the TBUC strategy and that outcomes delivery plan. Again, it's really just, this is a part where you're basically showing how the work you're doing is linking up to those higher level, basically a question we're all asked as funders and CRC and everybody is basically how the work we're supporting is making a contribution to these higher level kind of strategy documents. So this is where the bottom up is trying to reach that kind of top down approach as well, about how we're all making a contribution to that. So that's particularly important. Okay. Again, this is really what you would suppose we would call like a risk assessment. So it's just basically saying, do you foresee any issues that may impede progress in your work, and how do you plan to respond to these? For example, in the past, we would have had some kind of statements in here around how everybody was going to operate in the aftermath of COVID, so people were talking about, delivering things remotely. You might want to talk in here just around probably the kind of challenging political and also the funding environment that we're all operating at the minute. But there may also be other issues at a more local community issue that you would like to kind of highlight and respond to. So again, this is just demonstrating that you've taken account of some of the issues that may impede. And these are things that we would fully expect to see anybody who is successful in getting funding. Whenever you send in your progress reports to us, we would fully expect to see both challenges that you've faced and opportunities that you've been able to take on board. So this is how we try to operate as a funder, that we're flexible enough that things change, things happen over the year, that we are a core funder, so we do expect things to happen. Okay, so but that's just your opportunity to say, look, based on what you've had to deal with over the years anyway, what are some of the challenges and how you've basically faced them? Okay. Now, this is getting into the who, what, and where, basically, these questions. So this is where I'm saying again, just to emphasize this, we're asking in this section for you to provide a bit of information about who you would hope to be working with now. So we put some examples in there, okay? So it's basically what group you'd be hoping to work with, where they're located in terms of providing a postcode. And we'd ask people to provide postcodes if you can. The council area where that's located, the potential number of beneficiaries, so it's males, females, PEL, CNR, and then other identities. Again, we're keenly aware that this whole other, these are not the most kind of helpful of ways of breaking communities down. So within the system we have, we're limited to having 8 columns across the page, and we can't have any more. But that's just the way the questions are asked at the minute. Again, knowing that it's not ideal, but it's what we have at the minute. Okay, so it's basically asking for information. So you can add this information as much as you can here. And again, that helps to build up a sense in the assessor's head of, okay, you're doing this body of work, who are they hoping to engage with, and where is that going to be? Yes, we do. And again, we want people to understand as well, while we're asking about numbers of people you will be engaging, we fully understand that you might be working with a smaller number of people over a longer term because it's more difficult issues that have to be addressed, whilst for some other groups they might be having quite a larger number of people but operating with them maybe on a shorter term basis. That's all valid, okay? So we don't want to be comparing people against you thinking, oh, because you're involved in working with more, a greater number of people, you're going to score more highly on that. It's not about that. It's just really showing about the kind of either the depth or the breadth of the work you're engaging in, okay? So, and again, this is one of these things that we also understand, depending on the funding that you're able to secure for projects, that a lot of this can change over time. But it's just asking you to give your best sense of who you will be engaging with and where. Now, as you go down this, you also have an option. I did this yesterday. So As you go down, you can just hit this wee plus button if you want to add another row in. It just takes a wee second, okay, and then it brings you down again here, okay. So we're back down here, okay. So we've got 5 rows in here. So just add as you need to, and then I think you can delete this if you don't need it, okay. So we're back down to the 4 again. So it's just basically add as many of those as you feel you need, okay. So I suppose that's really more about your kind of outputs, okay. And then this part's asking some questions around the sort of outcomes that you're wanting to really to deliver on, okay. So folks, basically, you'll have that out. You have the themes and the outcomes up in the guidance notes up above. Okay, so basically, depending on what theme you've chosen, it only gives you kind of a certain number of outcomes that you can choose here. Okay, so that was because I used RSafe Community. It's only given a certain number of outcomes that you can choose from here. Okay, but we're also asking within that if you want to provide a bit more detail around, and it's basically asking the question, look, if we're trying to give a longer term view on what you're wanting to achieve through your body of work, that's where you put it in here as well. Okay. So again, all of this is building up a picture of where you want to get to with your body of work. Now we've only put in some examples in here. Okay. That ends up kind of looking a wee bit like outputs, but again, it's just to give a more sense of if we were to kind of provide a bigger picture of what you're wanting to do, you might say something in here. We're wanting to work with 50 people. We want to deliver these number of courses with them in order to do this, in order to bring people here over the longer term. And we want to engage with certain kind of, whether it's public bodies or statutory bodies, it's just, again, about that longer term kind of vision of what you're wanting to do or what you're wanting to kind of achieve through your work, okay? So that's basically what that's asking for. Now, this part here, and this is all these, you would have seen this is all a relic from all the whole outcomes-based accountability that's been talked about. Now, I think there's a wee bit of a move away from that so much, but anyway, this part is asking you, if somebody was to ask you what sort of, how would you kind of measure whether this has been successful or not? And this is just a kind of list of questions you might want to ask your participants, or how do you get that kind of impact of your work across? So it's basically just asking you, if you go through that list of questions there, it's just pick whatever one you think is most relevant, okay? Now, we're not in the place where we're asking people, because there's some funds that people access from the executive office where they're asking people now to fill in questionnaires and things like that. We're not going down that route. We're a different funding program in CORE, okay? But again, that just helps to build up a wee bit of a picture for the person doing the assessment around how this group kind of demonstrate the impact of their work. If you're accessing project funds from elsewhere, you may well have to be using this kind of questionnaires and the things, okay? So again, that's just kind of helps you join up the picture. But basically, at the minute, this is the only time you're going to be asked about any kind of questionnaire there, okay? So just put in whatever one you feel is most relevant to you, okay? There's an option to pick a second one, a second outcome, and to do that whole process again, getting a wee bit more detail of what you're wanting to achieve. But there's no red asterisks about it, so that's not a mandatory one, okay? So if you don't need it, don't use it. If you want to say something, you can do. Okay, and it's that same question again. Now, before I hit the Save Progress button, I just want to explain as well here, okay? Now, this is one work area, okay? So, sorry, I'll actually just save the progress and you'll see what happens here, okay? Now, I haven't put dummy information in there at the minute. But once you get down to the bottom, if you hit Save Progress, like we did with the first page, it'll tell you, okay, you haven't put in a title, you haven't put in this information. So again, that's all the areas that you need to add information in. So it will highlight down here that you need to add this. Okay, so any of those red boxes, you need to fill it in. But as we go down to the bottom here, I'll just go through into the return to summary section. And I'm just going to say a wee bit more about the work plans, okay? Now, when you go back into your summary page, you'll see, for example, see the work I was doing there in work area 1. It's still sitting as in progress because I haven't filled in some of the information. So, okay, so it's only whenever that's done that it'll turn to complete, okay? And it's only once you hit everything is sitting here is complete that you'll have the option, a button will come up about submitting your application form, okay? But it's only whenever the system is happy that you have put everything up as you need to put up that it will allow you to finish. Okay, but I need to show you here. Now, it's just basically within each of these sections, you've completed work area 1. Okay, now you have the option to complete up to 6 work areas. And what we always say to people is only complete the number of work areas you feel you need to explain your work. Some people have done 1 work area, some people have done 2. It tends to be averaging around 2 or 3. Some people do up to 6 of them. Okay, just depending on what you're wanting to do. What we always try to say to people is be as strategic as possible as you can with your work areas. So you might be doing a big piece of work on a regional basis across a lot of different areas. So if you can get that into 1 work area, that's absolutely fine. What we don't want to see really is whenever you kind of go through the different work areas, you see, oh, the same groups are being mentioned repeatedly across different work areas, because then it just ends up, it's looking like it's diluting everything. So the average tends to be 2 or 3 kind of work areas. Okay, so what I'm saying is don't be feeling pressure to go, oh, well, it'll be better if I fill in six work areas. Just fill in the amount that you need. Okay, and this is all part of the whole value for money assessment. All right, so don't be feeling I need to fill this all in because it'll look better. Once you start reading through the material, it very quickly becomes apparent that there's a lot of repetition happening, or you're kind of getting into work areas 4, 5, 6, and you're going, I'm not really sure how this is different or additional to what's already been proposed. So again, I suppose it's just a discipline with yourselves, okay? But again, if you have any questions or concerns about that, just give us a shout. Now, this is quite annoying, and Alana always hears me saying this. Basically, within this, say you've done 1 work area or 2, and you're happy. You've gone, I've said all I need to say. I don't need any more. But basically, you need to go into each work area and just confirm that you don't need a second work area. That just allows the system to say, okay, that's okay. We can move on to the next one. So it's a process we need to repeat a number of times. Okay, so again, just bear with me, folks. This is the really boring part. All right, so we'll have to hit return to summary on this. Okay, so basically, we need to repeat that. You need to repeat that process. So I've already done that for work area 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I need to repeat that again for work area 5 because I'm basically going in and saying, no, I don't need a 5th work area. Okay, save that. So just again, it's just hitting that return to summary button all the time. Now let me see, work area 6. So again, I'm saying, no, I don't need that. Save that progress. And return to your summary. Okay, so basically, again, once I've filled in information on working area 1, that'll go to complete. And once you fill in all the information that Michael talked about at the start, that box will also go to complete. Okay. Now we'll explain at the end what happens to this. Okay. But what we're always saying to people is, and I've went to the wrong second, but anyway, see through the whole application, right? As you're going through it, we would always say to people, look, once you've got through to a part where you're thinking, you know, something, I think I'm happy with that. We'd always say, see this button here, download as PDF. What that does, that obviously downloads a PDF of your entire application form, and it has it in a nicer kind of readable format. So what we would recommend to everybody is before you submit anything, download a PDF, read through the information carefully that you have submitted to make sure that you're happy with what you've put in. Okay, and we'd also ask, that's probably best to have another set of eyes looking at it, particularly maybe from a board member, because ultimately the board member is going to be one of those people. If you are successful in getting funding, they're one of the ones also that has to sign all the contracts and things like that. So it's just to make sure everybody's happy with what is being proposed. But again, just mainly is download that PDF, save it, okay? Read through the information to make sure you're happy and content with everything that you've put down. Again, we use those from our end of things. It just makes everything a lot more easy to read, okay? So you basically come and given your organization information. You've completed your 6 work areas. Now this information coming in now is really about how you're going to basically manage your work. Okay. Now this section here, so after this part, Michael's going to come back in because everybody, I'm sure, is bored listening to me. But anyway, but what we're asking people in this section is it's giving a wee bit more detail around. Now, you may apply for a particular post in your organization. Okay. So what we would have a combination of those work areas that I talked about above, they're probably for those people. Now, that could be like you could have a community relations coordinator or good relations coordinator, or it could be part of the work of the chief executive or whatever title you have. That's that kind of more about that more direct engagement with end users. Okay. This section is probably more about those support functions. So you may be applying for support for a finance officer or an admin officer or any other part, or this could be a wee bit more around some of the other kind of functions that a director or somebody else might have to undertake that you feel. I'd like to say a wee bit more about this because it's quite a big part of the work that we're doing. Again, this helps with the value for money assessment in that if you're asking for a particular post, then this kind of shows a wee bit more around the sort of work that's being delivered by those maybe more support functions, or it's the everyday stuff that you have to do in an organization when you're running them. So whenever you see the drop down there, you'll see just some of the examples: finance management, staff management, oversight of governance, strategic planning. Again, these are just some examples that we picked up from the fund over the years. So if you just go down this, scroll down it and see if something jumps out at you, or you can hit the other button as well. And it's just wherever you hit. Okay, so we'll coordination of programs, and then you can provide a wee bit more detail of the activity you're talking about there. Okay, so you have boxes to fill in there, and again, if you want to add anything additional, you can hit that button and add another row in there, just as we did before. But again, just use as much as you need and no more, basically. Okay, so you don't feel the need to have to give reams and reams of detail here. It's probably part of the core funding program that we'd like to be able to talk about a wee bit more, because I think sometimes people don't understand the importance of core funding, because we're always trying to say, if we didn't have this funding in place and organizations didn't have this sort of funding, this is what the impact would be, because I think sometimes that gets lost. You're the heartbeat of the organizations. Okay, so without that body of work that we talked about before wouldn't happen. Okay, now, so this is the part where I'm going to shut up for the time being. So, Michael, are you okay to come back in at this section just around how it would be managed by the organisation?
Okay? Yeah. Thanks, Stephen, for that. And you can see the amount of work that has to go into that part of the form, but the importance of that of doing that work, because that is the key information that we will use for assessing. So it's about the next part is then about the management of the fund. So now we want to know is, if you're awarded support from the core funding program, how does that governance in your organization? If it's about employing a couple of staff, what are the arrangements within the overall organization around supervision and support, performance review, appraisal for the and wider support functions for the co-workers that may also come from other staff. We also want to also see that you have sound financial and reporting systems in place. So give us an indication of, in terms of your finances, how are they managed, in terms of who's responsible for recording in and out, who's responsible for signing checks, the level of authority in terms of supplies, and the level of authority in terms of spend. So again, not a big pile of information, just if you can just be very succinct around, if we get money in, here's how it's going to be managed. And if this money the support is going to support us employing some workers, how will the worker be supported and managed on a day-to-day basis in their work? Again, as Damon said, but you see a progress, and then you also return to, and again, it will, as usual, you see the areas where, because there's nothing in the red areas, it will alert you to what has to be put in. back to a return to summary. And from that, then that leads you then to the budget. And I suppose this is the important bit around, well, what are you looking the fund to support? So we filled in one of the just for an example. So you can see from the top, you have to identify the jobs of the title that are being applied for. You have to specify the percentage contribution. And remember that we can only fund up to 90% of the total cost of salaries. Management fees and sessional workers' costs are not eligible. So this is direct costs for staff who will be working on the programme. So a community relations director, and this is just top of the head stuff. Salary is 35,000, national insurance contributions 2,000, a nice healthy £2,000 worth of pension. The total salary is 39,000, and you're requesting a maximum of 90%, which gets to 35,100. We've seen examples of core groups from last year will go in for 90. We've seen ones at 40, 50, 60%. So whilst it says 90, if you need only 50 or 60, then feel free to put it in. But always remember that when you put the amount in, and for instance, if you say you need the total salary is 39, and you have a 50% at 50%, the total requested from CRC will be less. You're also then going to have to demonstrate where you're going to get the other 50% from, and that's really important. So, and again, very much up to yourselves and your management committee as to what you think. So down the left, all the jobs that you would like the core fund to support, and fill in those as they go along. The table does the automatic calculations, and we tried that out yesterday. So thankfully, because my maths wouldn't be great, and I'd make a real hinge of it. So when you put 50% in, it will go the total requested from CRC, and at the bottom then you'll have the total salaries being supported, and then the total request from CRC. And again, that's an automatic total as well. So that's the first part of the form. And say, you have to those are red buttons, so you need to put them in. If you don't put anything in, it'll come back and say you haven't filled it in. So that's the first part, and then we go down to the second part of the budget. So this is then again, better you're repeating yourself, and unfortunately, the way our system is designed, if you put a CR director up top, it will not automatically put it into this one, so you have to retype again. So community relations director, the cost is 35,100. Again, you put in any more job titles that you had down there. And what we're hoping is if you have 4 jobs up at the top, you have 4 jobs in this section, and the salary cost total are equate to the salary costs in the above table. The next part then is the running costs, and those running costs are not capped at anything. So for travel, rent, phone, insurance, heat, light, audit, and any other parts, any other running costs that you think are applicable. The thing is, you need to make sure, to make sure that they are appropriate for the type of award that you're looking for and the type of program you're looking to be supported. So if you think the travel for the staff is going to be 500, that's fine. If the travel for the organisation is 5,000, don't be putting 5,000 in, because that's a complete organisation for that. So these are proportionate to the core fund staff that are being supported. So you'll have the running cost total, and that will make a grand total, and then that's what we are looking at in terms of is that an appropriate cost for the the fund or the work that's going to be carried out, and we make some judgment about that. Next part then is whether these salaries are applied for new or the positions that are currently exist. If there are ones that are currently exist, we need to know who the relevant funder is, so that again we can do some checking on that if we need to be. Just on salaries for new positions, if you're awarded funding, there will be, as part of the terms and conditions, you will be asked to confirm that any new positions will be advertised as per legal requirements. So it just isn't a case of going out onto the street and saying, somebody, and we want you in the job. They do have to be advertised. Next part then is how many years is your organisation applying for? Up to a maximum of 3 years. In some of these forms, you don't have to go for the maximum. Some groups have only applied for 1, some have applied for 2, and some have applied for 3, as explained earlier. So, you can up to the maximum of 3 years. Important to know that if you're saying a 2-year or a 3-year application, all we're looking for in terms of the work part of it is for year 1, 24 to 25. So don't be trying to cram in 3 years work into that. We will come, if you're awarded funding for a 2-year or a 3-year post, there will be update reports required, and that will form part of another application you have to make for the second or the 3rd year. So you can say up to 3 years, but your work plan is for 1 year. So then we need, as we said up above, you need match funding in place or the potential to have match funding. So any funding that's secured and the source and the contribution, and that doesn't have to come from grants. It might be that you're in a lucky position where you're going to cover it from your own sources. Any funding that you've applied for that are currently in progress, and an indication of the time scale for that decision. Hopefully you'll have an indication of time scale. Potentially there's some funders that might not be able to give that, but really important that you give us an indication of the funding that's been applied for, and then indicate any other plans for match funding for the grant contribution. And that might be through private philanthropy or whatever. So it gives us an indication that if there is, for instance, the work plan, you're indicating you're looking for 3 staff and you have a £15,000 deficit in the percentage that is required, that you have a fair indication that you'll be able to match that funding, so that when you're ready to roll with this, you have both our funding and the match funding in place, and you're not waiting for a time lag for some funding to kick into place. But again, that's it's an asterisk, it's a red star, and you need to put that in. And then the last 2 things, and this was new to me coming from another funder. I've never seen this before, but obviously through the experience of the core funding in the past, these are areas that have had to be addressed. Confirm the organisation is fully up to date with HMRC, yes or no. And if you say no, you'll be asked to explain, and please provide further information. Thank you for that. And the same thing then with the pensions. Are you fully up to date with workplace pension payments, and there are no existing debts? If you say no, you'll be asked to provide further information. It just gives an indication. That's again, they may be picked up in the financial checks, but it gives you an indication to highlight that there may be an issue that we need to be aware of. And it may be that we'll come back to you on that during the assessment process. So you have the budget, save that again, save progress, and then return to summary. And then you have the additional information and declaration. So again, it's been submitted with the knowledge and authorization of the management committee. And that is hugely, hugely important that it is the management committee know that this is being made, because they will be asked to, and they will be responsible for the work that is being carried out. We don't want to get into a situation where there's an application made by the worker, and when we come to the management committee, ask them for a progress report, they haven't a clue what we're talking about. So if the application is successful, it will be our management committee would be required to sign the agreement form before funds are paid. And an acknowledgement that information maybe in the application form may be made available to other agencies, because we will check if we think relevant with other agencies around some of that information. You will have the visions and values of CRC within the guidance notes, and they're reiterated again down here. And we're asking you again just to confirm that you share the visions and values of CRC. So you'll be asked to tick a box down below those statements. Yeah. And then the next part is really, really important, and because if they're uploaded and they're uploaded incorrectly, it could render your application eligible, and the database that you're loading up to will not recognise an incorrect document. So again, huge responsibility on the people who are submitting the application to make sure they've got the right documentation. Show your governance document, so that could be a constitution, and if you're a company limited by guarantee, you require that's your legal entity, so you need the article of association. So the file name, the date uploaded. If you have an organisational strategic plan, well, you have to have one. And that doesn't have to be a major one, but something which shows us that there is something in your plan around community relations. Again, file name and date uploaded. The next two are where we have really come in. We've found some difficulty with groups who don't, and they upload the wrong document. So the first one, just scroll up again, Alana, our team. The first one is your most recent set of audited accounts. So that's the audited accounts that have went to your board and that have been passed by your board. Obviously, if you're a registered charity and also a limited company guarantee, you'll have submitted the most recent audited accounts up to those agencies as well. We recognise that we're running in different time frames, and it might be that the time we close this application for the applications in November, you may not have had your AGM to do your audit accounts for 2022, 23. You can send them down to us at a later stage, but for the purpose of this, we will need your 21, 22 audit accounts. And then the next one is your most recent set of management accounts, and they're not audited accounts. They are the accounts that are presented to your committee, your management committee, at your monthly meetings or your quarterly meetings, which gives us a more up-to-date account of your financial position in terms of income, expenditure, assets, liabilities, and reserves. So you update the most recent ones that have been presented to your last management committee. So really, really important just to remember that your management accounts are not your audit accounts, and your audit accounts are not your management accounts. We need both. And unfortunately, a couple of organisations have fell foul of that. And as I said before, if you upload your audit accounts into that section of management accounts, our database doesn't say you've uploaded the wrong ones. An organisational chart just showing the roles and responsibilities from your management committee down. Your current list of board and committee members, again, you need to list them, upload that. And if you have that list with their roles and responsibilities, that would be really helpful. And then upload a community relations policy, a good relations policy, or an equality policy. And file name, again, upload. If you work with children, young people and vulnerable adults, then have you got a safeguarding policy? And we like to see, we definitely want to see that safeguarding policy uploaded. We need it as it's a requirement. If you say yes, it comes there. If you say no, that's fine. But we will no. If you say no, then you really need to make sure that within the body of your application, there is no reference to working with young people or adults, because one doesn't equate with the other. So if you say no, be very clear, be very careful that you haven't mentioned working with adults and vulnerable adults or young people in the body of the application. Once you get to there, you see a progress. Now, for me in this one, this is really, really important that when you're downloading these documents, there are two people doing it together. One, to make sure that it's the right document that's being downloaded, being downloaded, and the other just to check off. What we don't want to know, and it's really important that one person uploads it and uploads the wrong thing, and because of that, it's not eligible for assessment. And it could have been a real humdinger of an application, and you get a letter in late February, early March saying your application has been rejected. We don't want that person scapegoated. So really important that if it is the worker is accompanied by a member of the board, and if it's the board, that there are two board members that do that. As Damon said, also just don't keep downloading as a PDF, which is really, really important, because that gives you a better way of reading what you have written, rather than going through that form again, because I think that would be a nightmare to keep going back and going forward. Damon, do you want to take the last bit then around the submission bit, the submit button, where that is?
Yeah. So Alana, it comes up it's up around here, isn't it, Alana? So basically, folks, as Michael's saying there, it's only once you have completed everything that you'll have a submit button. Now, it has happened once in the past that somebody has actually hit a submit button in error. Okay, so what we would ask you to do is go through all that process, download your PDF, check with the members of your board, make sure you're happy with everything before you hit the submit button. Now, if the mistake is made and you hit the submit button in error, you can request through Michael. We'll get a process where we'll try to get it open for you again, okay? But once we've got past 4 p.m. on the 17th of November, if you haven't got, basically no changes can be made after the deadline date, so you can't request something to be added or uploaded after that event. The submission process is finished. So again, that's why that download as PDF is so important, just for you to make sure you're happy and content with everything that's down on the pages. I think that was it, wasn't it, Michael? Was there anything else I forgot about? But anyway, so what I'm saying, we're just emphasizing, if you don't see a submit button up here, it's there for a reason. It will only come up if the system has everything needed there. And as Michael had said, the system can't recognize the difference between audited accounts and management accounts. You need to make sure that you've got the right file up there. Again, if you download it as a PDF, you'll be able to see, right, I have the management accounts in the management accounts section, and the audited accounts in the audited accounts section. And again, it's just very briefly to say, some of the questions we're asking, you're probably thinking, God, why are you asking this? Stuff around HMRC and pensions and safeguarding, these again are from issues that have emerged just over the years of practice with groups, that there's been issues that emerged, and that's why we have to ask some of those questions, okay? So again, it's just to let you know we are asking them for a reason, okay? So I think that's all from on the application form, is it? Yep. Alana, are you happy? Is there anything else we need to say on that, or are we happy?
I just say, just don't put in any holding information. The application form is there to show you where you haven't filled it in yet. So just don't put in anything, oh, I'll put this in just in case, and then I'll go back to it. Because we've had that in the past too, and that, as I say, and those applications will then be rejected. So the system's there to help you to know where you haven't filled in. So anything that you want to leave blank, leave it blank and go back to it, and just make sure you're putting in the correct information there.
So key points to consider, and we've talked about this before. Read the guidance note thoroughly before completing the application, and if you need a guidance or you need to clarify something, at the end of the slides, on the slides we put up for you later on, my email address is there, and if you can't get me, Damon and Alana are then the next points of contact. When considering the community relations value of your proposal, use the key principles within the guidance, which outlines the information you should include. I know quite a few people on the call this morning, and I'm sure I know quite a few people on the call tomorrow morning. Please do not assume prior knowledge of your work. We can only score on the information provided in the application. So whether I know the group or I don't know the group, everybody will start off, and all the other assessors who may be working this, everybody starts off with the presumption that we know nothing. And you need, to please do not assume prior knowledge. And we've had that in the past where groups have made applications and we know their work, but they didn't put it down in paper and they were scored accordingly. Make sure you've uploaded all of the documentation before submitting your bid. And again, it's a consistent message. We're trying to put across. Our system doesn't recognise whether the correct information is uploaded or not. Plain English is fine. There are no buzzwords that we're looking for. So keep it plain, keep it simple so that we can understand it. And in many ways, the best thing to do if you're putting in buzzwords, print out your PDF and get somebody else to read it. And if they can't understand it, then there's a good chance that we can't understand it as well and change before you submit. And then, as we've said before, there's a difference between management accounts and annual accounts, and we require both of them. So, as Damon has mentioned, I think Alana has mentioned as well, deadline is Friday the 17th of November at 4 p.m. So if you need any changes, or if you're making changes to your document and you haven't submitted it by that, do so. And please don't leave it at 3.55 or 3.59 p.m. on Friday the 17th of November. Murphy's Law will kick in and something will happen, you don't get it submitted. So I would always say to people have it submitted an hour before, and at least then you can relax. Because when 4 p.m. comes in, there will be a note to say this fund has now closed and our system will not accept any more applications or any changes to applications. So just to give you some indication of the deadlines, the applications will start then in November and run through to, or the assessment will run through from November to January. And during that time, that will include the financial checks done by an external accountancy firm. We hope to have the decision panel the week commencing Monday, the 12th of February, and then we'll roll out the decisions in the coming weeks. One of the things that we are all mindful of is, we'll not know at that stage, and this is again experience, what the total money for the core fund is by 12th of February. But we'll do when we do know, we'll get then the final letters of offer out to groups. And finally, that's our three contact email addresses. If you need any information, please don't be afraid to get in contact with us. At the first point of call, if you email me, and if you email me and you get an out of office message, feel free to email Damien or Alana. I work from 9 to 2:30, Monday to Thursday. So if you're emailing on a Friday, it's probably better to email Damien or Alana. If it's an emergency, you can email them on a Friday. If it's one that can wait to the following week, please feel free just to email me. And if I don't know the answer, and Damien doesn't know the answer, and Alana doesn't know the answer, we're stuffed. No, not really. We'll get the answer for you, and we'll put it up for people.